So I came last year with my first greenhouse tomato short course, and so this is my second time to present and talk to y'all about diseases. First of all, I know yesterday they said a lot of you raised your hands and said you were just thinking about going into greenhouse production of tomatoes or possibly other various crops. So I have a little bit of information in here that will introduce you to thinking about disease development, what to look for with certain diseases, and then for those of you who are already producing, what to look for also with the new diseases and how to manage some of those diseases. Maybe so that if you're not already incorporating some of those management practices, you can begin to incorporate those practices and learn to reduce disease development. So what is a plant disease? A definition that I like by a particular author was any abnormality in a plant's growth, development, functioning, value, or appearance due to the activity of a pathogenic biotic agent. And this can be distinguished from what some people may term a disorder, which may be a nutritional deficiency or due to some other physiological agent. So, as Dr. Snyder mentioned, I'm an extension pathologist. I get phone calls. People bring samples in or send me emails with pictures, and I try and identify which pathogenic living agent it is that's responsible for the disease so that I can try and figure out how to help manage it. So we're going to go through Plant Pathology 101 and try and get you thinking about disease development. So when you take plant pathology in grad school, you are taught about the disease triangle, which I'll show you in the next slide. But there are 3 conditions that are necessary for disease development to occur. So now I'm going to ask y'all to tell me what some of those, what those 3 conditions are. So,
environmental conditions.
Okay, environmental conditions is one.
Temperature.
What's that?
Temperature.
Temperature would factor into the environmental conditions.
Nutrients.
Nutrients could also factor into environmental conditions.
A host.
Okay, we have a host. You need a susceptible host. One more.
Pathogen.
And the pathogen, correct. So, the 3 conditions, you need a virulent pathogen that can be, for example, bacteria, fungi, or viruses. You need a susceptible host. Hosts may be susceptible depending on the particular species or depending on the variety. And also included in a susceptible host is the tissue type. With some diseases, only the foliage is infected. With other diseases, perhaps you only see symptoms expressed on the fruits. And then favorable environment, as some of you mentioned, you have temperature. Moisture would also be included in that, and maybe nutrient availability. So, if any one of those conditions is absent, then disease will not develop. So what we're looking for with disease management is to try to modify one of those 3 conditions so that disease development does not occur. So just some general disease management strategies before I start talking about specific diseases, and a lot of these were covered yesterday in one of the presentations. But you always want to begin with healthy, disease-free plants. As I believe Dr. Snyder talked about yesterday, about why we use greenhouses. I believe it was in that talk that someone said, or maybe another talk that someone said, a happy plant is a healthy plant. Well, with a greenhouse, whatever you bring, it can help to exclude pathogens. So if you bring a pathogen into the greenhouse, a lot of the environmental conditions that are favorable for plant growth and development are also favorable for disease development. So you really want to keep pathogens out. And one of the ways in doing that is beginning with disease-free plants. Now this could be referring to beginning with clean seed. You may want to purchase your seed from a trusted seed supply company. You may want to purchase certified seed if that's available. For some diseases and for various crop seeds, you can apply hot water treatments or chemical treatments to help reduce the possibility of disease. And then also, when you're planting transplants, if you have a transplant that is looking sickly or is expressing some type of symptoms, you probably don't want to put that disease in the greenhouse, because again, if you introduce it into the greenhouse, the pathogen can reproduce and become very rampant. You also want to choose appropriate varieties. So on here I say grow varieties that are suitable for your area. This is from another presentation where I was talking about field crops, but this can apply to greenhouses as well. There are certain varieties of tomato that are bred and that do well in a greenhouse. So you want to choose a variety that does well in the greenhouse, because a happy plant can be a healthy plant, and a healthy plant can better fend off pathogens. And then I also have that if they're available, you want to choose varieties that have disease resistance. Resistance is the ideal method for combating disease. And I know some greenhouse tomatoes have disease resistance, and I will show you a sample of how you can find out which varieties have disease resistance a little later on in the talk. But especially if you know that you've had a problem in the past, looking for a variety that will suit your production needs as well as try and help you manage disease would also be good for looking at disease resistance. Okay, again, this is from a previous talk, but I say choose a proper planting site. Instead of choosing a proper planting site, here I might say maintain the appropriate environment. So again, yesterday people talked about humidity in the greenhouse, airflow. Again, those are both that factor into environmental conditions. If high humidity and moisture or available moisture on plants favors disease development, then again, if you're in a controlled environment, you can control that environment. What you do can help to reduce disease development. Okay, and I just talked about some of that because I forgot the slide was right here. But again, that's the environmental manipulation that I was talking about. Again, lowering the humidity, that can be done through increased ventilation and cycling the air through the use of horizontal fans, like you see here. You can increase the temperature. Some pathogens favor cooler temperatures, other pathogens favor warmer temperatures. Avoiding formation of condensation on greenhouse or plant surfaces. Again, you can work on that with ventilation, and then also the picture I have at the top here, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but they have anti-drip plastic. This is not anti-drip plastic because you can see the condensation forming there, and that condensation can then drip on your plants, and again, that water that drips on the plants can then keep the foliage or the fruits wet for longer periods of time and allow for pathogens to infect the plants, and again, increasing that air circulation. Practicing good sanitation. That's probably something that a lot of people overlook. It may be something that you're doing, but you may be able to improve your sanitation methods. Removing plant debris and infected tissues, or sometimes whole plants. When you see an infected plant, particularly depending on what it is, that plant can serve as a source of inoculum for your pathogen. So you may just want to remove that entire plant from the greenhouse before it has a chance to really spread throughout the greenhouse. And then when you do remove that plant or even tissues, you don't want to leave that plant debris just sitting around in the greenhouse or even near to a greenhouse, because again, with the greenhouses, when you vent, you're pulling air in from outside. Pathogens may be able to get back into the greenhouse. Using new containers and growth medium, or disinfecting old containers and growth medium. Again, pathogens, some of them produce survival structures, and they may be able to persist in the growth medium, or they may be able to remain on the surface of those containers. So you want to clean, sterilize, and use new growth medium or new supplies when necessary. And then you may need to disinfect greenhouses. That can be cleaning the surface floor, or just completely removing everything, and then there are various options that you can use to disinfect the entire greenhouse. Something we saw yesterday, you can set up a clean room I have this along in with sanitation, so that again, you're avoiding bringing pathogens into the greenhouse. That's one of the great things about greenhouses is that you already have some sort of protection, but adding an extra level of protection can help. Disinfecting tools and equipment. You can use a 10% bleach solution or some of the other chemicals, 70% ethanol as well. If you're making cuts or pruning plants, you want to disinfect the tools in between cuts so that you can avoid spreading the pathogen. And as Jamie talked about yesterday, they didn't want anyone that maybe a smoker or a tobacco user to touch any of the plants, because with some of the viruses, you can spread viruses just through the use of tobacco products. So again, this is an example of a foot bath. We had that yesterday, or you may want to cover your shoes or wash your hands. Again, you want to avoid bringing pathogens into the greenhouse. This is an example of what I talked about. You don't want to leave a huge pile of plant debris next to your greenhouses, or even all of these supplies that can still serve as a source of vegetation that may harbor pathogens. And then maintaining a clean strip around the greenhouse as well, especially for viruses that are transmitted by insects. If you have weeds or around the greenhouse, then those weeds could either serve as a source of the insects or as a source of pathogens, because some pathogens can affect multiple hosts. Using proper cultural practices. Again, we talked a lot about that yesterday. I have at the end here, plant health maintenance. Again, plant is a happy plant. You want to make sure that you're providing adequate nutrition and not over-fertilizing or under-fertilizing. Using proper pruning practices, you may be able to improve your pruning practices to avoid wounding plants so that the plants can heal more quickly, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Avoiding overhead irrigation, again, that's one way to keep the foliage from remaining wet for longer periods of time, because particularly with fungi, they require free moisture on the plants in order to infect. And then with a lot of bacterial pathogens, they can be rain or water splashed from one source of infection to other leaves. Choosing an irrigation time that avoids excess periods of moisture in the greenhouse and avoiding puddles. Maintaining sufficient drainage, again, that ties into the moisture. Pruning when leaves are not wet, and when the plant tissues are turgid enough to get that clean break to allow time to dry. Pathogens can attach to your clothes and the tools, so again, you don't want to work in the greenhouse and go from, especially when the plants are wet, so that you're the vector of some of these pathogens and that you are the ones spreading the pathogens throughout the greenhouse. And then I have applied pesticides. I won't talk too much about that, but there are several fungicides or other chemical products, including some OMRI or organic products that can be used and that are effective against various pathogens in the greenhouse. Again, for any of those products, you want to completely read the label and follow the directions, because the label is the law. And some of the information that's on those labels are restrictions for greenhouse use. Specific fungicides or pesticides will either restrict the use in the greenhouse, or it may give you certain directions for greenhouse use that is different from use in the field. It will give you information about personal protective equipment, as well as the re-entry intervals and the rates at which you can use those products. And then, particularly in order to prevent the buildup of resistant pathogen populations and to maintain the fungicide chemistries that we do have, you want to rotate fungicide chemistries or products that utilize different modes of action so that you are not building up a pathogen population that then you don't have any means to control. So that's a lot of different categories and specific types of general management practices. But integrated pest management, which uses a combination of several of those techniques, is important. And then the more cultural practices and sanitation that you use that may help to reduce the amount of pesticides that are necessary. So how can you be prepared to manage disease? Well, you should know your plant, know what it looks like through all growth stages, know what particular deficiencies or toxicities look like, know and be able to recognize the diseases that do occur in your crop. There are many different plant pathogens, but only a certain number will infect a particular crop, and you can narrow that down even further, and that only a certain number of them are typically common, particularly either in a certain area or under certain conditions. You want to be observant. Scout regularly for disease. This was mentioned yesterday. Sometimes if you see symptoms, it may already be too late if you're not scouting regularly. Keep records, particularly if you're spraying fungicides or other products, temperature, humidity, what variety you're using. All that information can help you try and narrow down and identify what the disease problem is. Know where to find information about diseases. Know your resources. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Know what information to collect, and kind of already mentioned that about varieties. Pay attention to the different types of symptoms so that you can describe that if you talk to an extension specialist or your county agent, and that goes along with knowing who to contact for help. So here's a little quiz. How many of you can identify these diseases? Any ideas on this one on the left? Okay. Tomato spotted wilt virus. What about? Okay. And blossom end rot is not actually a disease. It's a disorder caused by calcium deficiency, but a lot of people think it's a disease. Oops, I gave y'all that one already. Okay. That's physiological leaf roll. Again, not a disease. It's something that you may commonly see. What about down here? What's that? No. That's early blight. So you can see that a lot in field tomatoes. I haven't seen it in greenhouse tomatoes, but I did include that here. Again, almost gave it away. Anyone know about that one? You're not supposed to answer. Okay, that one's leaf mold. So leaf mold can be common in greenhouses, particularly with the high humidity, and I have seen that. And then what about the black one? Okay. It's a wilted plant.
Southern blight.
Okay, there's southern blight. There are several diseases that can cause wilting. This one in particular is bacterial wilt. So if you know kind of what to look for and what potential diseases it might be, that can help you to address the problem sooner. Again, the first step in disease management is diagnosis. You need to identify the cause of the symptoms, and then the management methods that you use will depend on the biology and the life cycle of that pathogen. Just a quick thing, what plant pathologists use, we look for symptoms and for signs. Symptoms are the expression of, the visual manifestations of disease. It's the plant's reaction or expression to infection. And when we're talking about signs, it's actually the visible presence of a pathogen. That could be the mold growth or bacterial ooze or sclerotia in some cases, which I'll talk about later. But you can have, this is an example of some bacterial symptoms. You can have wilting, you can have spots on leaves or in fruit on the stems as well. So there are almost 200 plant diseases that can infect tomatoes. These are just some of them. A lot of them are fungal diseases. You have a lot of virus diseases and some bacterial diseases that I'll talk about. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to some of the diseases, tell you a little bit about the biology, what kind of pathogen causes them, and then some management methods for those specific diseases. I don't go into a lot of detail for all of them. Some of them are just included because I wanted you to be familiar with what to look for, or if you see some of those symptoms in the greenhouse, to kind of start, paying attention to what's going on. So, gray mold is caused by a fungus. Some people call it botrytis. That's the genus of the fungus that causes it. It affects all above ground plant parts. It does not actively infect healthy tissue. Botrytis favors cooler temperatures, free moisture, and high humidity, and it can spread very rapidly when in the spores can move to new plants by wind or air movement, but again, this is one that requires the free moisture for germination, and it can survive from season to season in the form of sclerotia. So, particularly with botrytis, wounds and dead tissue serve as points of entry for infection, and then they can serve as a source of the pathogen. So, you might have seen some of this yesterday. We had some botrytis lesions on the stem, but you can have brown lesions on the leaves as well, with tan to dark brown lesions on the stems. And then when that fungus begins to sporulate, you can get brown or gray fuzzy fungal growth that you can see here. A unique symptom of this disease are ghost spots. You can see little white circular spots that appear on tomato fruit. That's where a spore of botrytis is germinated, but infection fails. And then if these stem lesions grow large enough and grow around the stem, they can completely girdle the stem, and you can have wilting and plant death. So how can you manage gray mold? Thinning of lower foliage can help to improve air circulation. Pruning should be done in the morning or in the early afternoon. Avoid ripping the stems so that you have these large wounds, which again can serve as a site for infection. Do not leave branch spikes when pruning like this. Again, that's a good spot for gray mold to infect, and then once it infects this dead tissue, then it can begin moving.
I got a question on, like if you do break your branch like that, is there anything you put on there to help it heal faster, or is there any culture
Heal
effect?
faster, that would be it.
Well, not heal, but to protect it from getting infection there.
There are fungicides that you can use. Most fungicides are protectants, but I would make sure that you have a clean break whenever you do prune that. And that's something that you may be able to change with your practices. What I mentioned earlier about pruning when the tissue is turgid, then that can help you to get a clean break, and that clean break will heal over faster than something like this.
The leaves should really be snatched off and not pruned.
Well, yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking in my mind. And then you want to remove plant debris, and cutting out stem lesions can also be helpful, particularly when you have stem infections. Again, with botrytis, reducing humidity and free moisture on plants, and adjusting your ventilation, your heating, and your temperature, your irrigation practices, and having horizontal airflow fans can all help with that. And then there are fungicides or OMRI approved products that are effective against botrytis. So a lot of you may have picked up I can't think of the exact name of it, the Greenhouse Tomatoes Pest Management Guide that was on the table. I believe that guide that was out there was actually from 2008, and there is an updated version of that. The disease part has not been updated in a while. I haven't gotten to this yet, but this is a list of, this part has been updated, and this will be available in the presentation that's available online. So as soon as I do get to update the rest of that table, it will be available online. Leaf mold, this is what I had spoken to you about earlier. It's caused by fungus that largely affects the foliage. It favors high humidity. If you have humidity below 85%, you will not have disease development. And moderate temperatures, and this pathogen can survive on crop residue. And seed can also be contaminated. Signs and symptoms, I visited an operation last year, and this was just a sample picture. Leaf mold was present on much of his tomato crop. On the top of the leaves, or the upper surfaces of the oldest leaves, you have the yellow spots like this. And if you flip those leaves over, you have an olive green mold growth. Management for leaf mold, you want to remove and destroy the crop residue, clean and sanitize your production areas. Hot water treatment of seeds may be effective. You want to minimize or avoid long periods of leaf wetness and high humidity. There are some resistant and tolerant varieties, and I'll show you that a little later, and then there are fungicides that are effective as well. Early blight, this is what some of you thought was a bacterial disease, and a lot of times symptoms can resemble various diseases, and so it's important to have a specialist identify what particular pathogen is a disease. Early blight can affect stems, leaves, and fruit. It's seed-borne. It can survive on infected debris and another plant host, and again, it favors high humidity and mild temperatures. So you have a lot of these different things that keep occurring. High humidity, various temperatures, they can survive on infected debris. So again, if you apply some of those general pest management practices, that can help to reduce disease development of many different diseases. Symptoms and signs of leaf blight: you have circular brown spots or lesions with concentric rings that you may be able to see in some of this, particularly on the stems. On the stems, you have brown, sunken, circular, or elongated lesions, and this can also girdle the plants, and then you can get a lot of defoliation. You want to use varieties with some level of resistance. I'm not sure if the greenhouse varieties have resistance to early blight. I'm not familiar enough with the greenhouse varieties. You want to use seed without significant pathogen levels or treat the infested seed. Remove other host species that may serve as sources of inoculum. You want to remove infected transplants and plant debris, and again, there are fungicides that can be used. I included powdery mildew in here, but I don't talk about it too much. Most people are familiar with powdery mildew. It has the white powdery colonies on the upper leaf surface, and this is caused by fungus, and it's usually a warm temperature disease. Target spot, this is also caused by fungus. You have small water-soaked spots on the upper surface of the older leaves. Again, some of these may be confused with a bacterial disease or possibly also with early blight. On the fruits, rings resemble a target, which gives the disease its name. And the sunken brown lesions on the fruit often crack open, like you see here. And so for both powdery mildew and target spot, there are fungicides that are effective. Timber rot, again, another fungal disease. This favors cool, moist temperatures. Free moisture and high humidity are important for disease development, and with this, disease is often seen at flowering. One of the things you will see is sclerotia produced in the dead tissues, and that's a classic sign of timber rot, or it's also called white mold. So you can see some of the signs and symptoms here. You have water-soaked areas near the leaf axils or the stem joints. The stems can become bleached and turn light gray or whitish in appearance. You will often see white fungal growth, and then, as I pointed out in the previous slide, the black or rock-like sclerotia. And you can have yellowing, wilting, and death of the plant tops, particularly if that stem is affected. Management of timber rot includes removing plant debris, reducing humidity and free moisture, and applying fungicides. So now to move on to some of the bacterial diseases. Bacterial canker is probably one of the most important bacterial diseases of tomato in greenhouses. It can spread rapidly, and signs and symptoms, you can get systemic wilting, or as you see in the top photo, intraveinal pale green to yellow patches that eventually become necrotic. You can have light and dark brown streaks on stems, and also vascular discoloration, and then on the fruit you can also get spots. Bacterial canker can be managed by using high-quality seeds that are free of detectable plant populations. You may want to treat seed lots, remove diseased plants or neighboring trays, particularly when you're doing transplant production. You want to sanitize workspaces, potting media, pots, and tools. Wear clean clothes and dedicated boots for greenhouse use. Again, someone yesterday said that having a dedicated set of greenhouse clothes can be helpful. Use disinfectant foot baths. Again, you want to try and keep the pathogen out of the greenhouse. Wash your hands before and after greenhouse entry, and then, as I mentioned earlier, bacteria can spread through splashing rain or irrigation water, so avoiding overhead irrigation and working in the crop when wet can help to reduce spread of this disease. And then in some instances, copper sprays have been effective. Bacterial wilt is another bacterial disease. It can survive in soil and in surface water. It occurs mostly in the southern United States. I have seen this in the greenhouse, and there were pretty devastating plant losses in the greenhouse. This is also a issue in the field. This disease favors high temperatures, and it can be very difficult to manage once it's established. Symptoms and signs, you can have this, while you have wilting that occurs in many tomatoes, with many tomato diseases, wilting that occurs due to bacterial wilt is often very rapid, and you have necrosis and plant death that follow. Inside the stem near the soil line, you can have dark water-soaked areas, and then when you cut that stem open, you can have vascular discoloration. Later stages may result in hollow stems, and you can also have necrosis and bacterial streaming. And with bacterial streaming, one of the things that we do is we cut the stem near the base, and then we clean that stem and we put it in a glass of water or any small container of water. And then if you leave it sit there, if you can see this cloudy white stream, that's the bacteria actually coming out of that stem. So that may be a way to distinguish between a bacterial disease and a fungal disease. Particularly with bacterial wilt, this tends to be more prevalent with wilt than with other bacterial diseases. Managing bacterial wilt, again, sanitation practices similar to what I mentioned for bacterial canker can help to keep the pathogen outside of the greenhouse. Bacterial speck and spot are two other bacterial diseases that even for experienced pathologists can be very difficult to identify or distinguish. There are several different bacterial species that cause these two diseases. They are both seed-borne and favor high humidity. The bacteria can survive in plant debris or in other plant hosts, but one of the things that can distinguish these two is that bacterial speck favors cool temperatures, whereas bacterial spot favors warm temperatures. So if you see symptoms that are similar to either of these diseases and you have been paying attention to the climate and what's going on, you may be able to narrow it down based on the temperature. With bacterial speck, you have brown, dark brown, to black lesions on the leaves, as you see here. These lesions may become oval or elongated on other above ground plant parts, and you may have a halo or a yellow ring that occurs around lesions over time. And on the fruit, you can have small spots that may be slightly raised or flat or sometimes sunken. With bacterial spot, again, you have round circular lesions on leaves or stems. Eventually, you may get a shot hole appearance after these lesions become necrotic and fall out from the plant. You can have holes that look similar to this. And on the fruit, the lesions tend to be larger and rougher compared to bacterial specks. So for both of these, you want to plant high-quality seeds free of detectable pathogen populations. You want to treat seeds, remove diseased plants and neighboring traits. Again, that's particularly with transplant production. You want to practice sanitation of workspaces and tools and wash your hands. And avoid overhead irrigation and working in the crop and wet, and then some pesticides may be effective at reducing disease. Tomato spotted wilt virus, a lot of you knew this disease or were familiar with the symptoms of this. It's caused by a virus. Infection is systemic and it's transmitted by thrips. So it's the immature thrips that acquire the disease, but the adults then transmit for the rest of their lives. And it is found in many weed species. So again, that's one of the things that you can try and reduce by making sure that you don't have any weeds growing near your greenhouse. Symptoms, you can have bronze coloration of the leaves that are in irregularly shaped circular small black spots on the leaves that may then become wilted or droop. The plants may also be stunted, and then on the fruit you can have chlorotic rings, patches, and lesions if fruit is produced. Management of tomato spotted wilt virus includes scouting frequently and controlling thrips and removing infected plants immediately. There are also resistant cultivars for tomato spotted wilt virus, and again controlling weeds around the greenhouse. I don't have a lot about tomato yellow leaf curl virus, but I just wanted to show you an example of the symptoms. Most of these diseases the symptoms are described in that pest management guide for greenhouse tomatoes. I kind of wanted to give you photos that could go along with those symptoms. Tomato yellow leaf curl virus, again, is caused by a virus. This one is transmitted by whiteflies, and the symptoms, the leaves on the top can develop interveinal chlorosis, and the sides will curl upwards. The leaves may appear crinkly. So that's my run-through of various specific diseases. Again, I mentioned resources were important. There are lots of different resources. There are several on msucares.com for Mississippi State University Extension. This is the Greenhouse Tomatoes Pest Management in Mississippi. Is the one that is updated from the handout that was available at the registration table, and I hope to get that one updated in the near future as far as the fungicides that are available. Basil in the greenhouse was mentioned yesterday. There is a new greenhouse basil downy mildew publication that was put together by one of our plant pathologists. And then the publication how to collect and package plant disease specimens for diagnosis. If you need to send samples to our MSU Plant Disease and Nematode Diagnostic Service has also been updated. Again, that was MSU, but lots of universities have various publications. These are just examples. So you can find a lot of free publications produced by university personnel about specific diseases that can help you in your management needs. Again, two other resources. I mentioned OMRI Products, the Organic Materials Review Institute. Again, since I don't have that pesticide list updated, if you want to find out what products are OMRI listed, if you're interested in organic production, you can visit www.omri.org, and there's a list of OMRI approved products. The Crop Data Management System website has a label database. It should be free to sign up for an account, and then you can use the search function to try and identify which products may be available for use in your particular crop. And you can get labels for the products there. One of the publications that we have in the southeastern U.S. is the Southeastern U.S. Vegetable Crop Handbook. Some of you may be familiar with this book. It is available in hard copy, but it's also available online. And this is a section out of that book. So as I mentioned, you want to make sure that you're using crops that are appropriate for your area or for your specific use. So this is a excerpt from the table of recommended tomato varieties. This is for greenhouse types. And if you go through here, you can see all the ones with the letter M are those that are recommended for production in Mississippi. And then if we look at Starbuck, you can see all of these numbers around here. I told you, mentioned about resistant varieties. If you go down to the bottom of the table, these tell you which diseases that variety has resistance to. So Starbuck has resistance or tolerance to Fusarium wilt, Fusarium crown root rot, Verticillium wilt, tobacco mosaic virus, and Cladosporium, which that's an old name, that is the leaf mold pathogen. And again, there's also recommended cucumber varieties for greenhouse production on page 50 of that book. Other tables of interest that would help you in your disease management, you have a greenhouse disease control for tomato and other vegetable crops. That gives you a list of products that can be used. You have biorational and biological products for greenhouse disease management if you want to try and use biorationals or biologicals rather than some of the other fungicides. And there's also an efficacy of products for greenhouse disease control, and it'll tell you whether or not the products listed in that table are very good or fair or poor for managing particular diseases. There's also a section on seed treatments. I mentioned a lot of seed treatments about the and managing bacterial diseases. And then there's a section on water, produce, and equipment sanitation, as well as generic fungicides for use on vegetable crops. So what that is it gives you the active ingredient trade names that are available with that active ingredient. And another table of interest that I mentioned, you want to rotate fungicides to avoid the buildup of resistant populations. Table 356 in that book gives you the Fungicide Resistance Action Committee codes. So when you want to rotate chemicals, you want to rotate using products that do not fall within the same FRAC group. And again, this gives you the group name of the chemical, and then the example active ingredient, and then example products. Okay, so several of you saw the compendium of tomato diseases and pests. As I mentioned, there are lots of free resources and publications that are available online from various universities. These are some books that I use when I get calls and I have to look. If you are interested, these books are available for purchase through a website, which I'll show you on the next slide, or in a couple of slides. And then they may also be available at other sources like Amazon. But this is the Professional Society for Plant Pathologists is the one that produces these books. And the tomato disease one is the second edition now. It's been updated in 2014. These other ones for cucurbits and lettuce they're last published in 96 and 97. I don't know when a new edition would become available. But just to give you an idea of what this is, it gives you information about all the major and some of the minor fungal diseases, bacterial diseases. It shows you pictures, and it gives you some management information. Again, this just may be a good resource if you're interested, but there are a lot of resources that are free and available online. So that's an example. If you're interested in those, if you go to www.apsnet.org, you can then go up here to APS Store. And then if you go to the compendium series here on the left, then it'll give you a list of all of the compendium series that are available, and then you can try and find them elsewhere, but they are available through this site as well. So that is what I have. Actually, I'm going to go through. People talked about cucurbit downy mildew, just to give you a picture of what cucurbit downy mildew is in cucumber. It can be very destructive. I'll just go through. Okay, so on the upper surface, it begins as slightly chlorotic or bright yellow lesions. With cucumbers, those lesions are typically angular, as you see here. But then when you look at the underside of the leaves, you can have a downy appearance that you see the fungal growth that may be gray to purplish in color. So that can be a very devastating disease. And that, at least in the field, is largely controlled with fungicides. And then if you suspect that you have cucurbit downy mildew, you should contact your county agent or myself so we can keep track of it. There is a forecasting system to track the progress of cucurbit downy mildew from southern United States all the way up through Canada, and that system can help give you a risk that's associated with your area or location and indicate whether you should apply fungicides to try and help you target your fungicide applications. And then I don't have any information on here. I mentioned the basal downy mildew publication that we have. These are photos of what basal downy mildew looks like. So you can have the yellowing or chlorosis of the top leaves, and then again when you flip the leaves over, you can have the brown or purplish fungal growth and discoloration that you see on the bottom. Okay. So now that's it. So this is my contact information, and I will try to answer any questions if you have any questions.
Disease question.
Comment, the compendium book that you mentioned is $100 for a print copy,
Yes.
but if you
I did not know that.
Google Play. How'd you find that out? That's pretty good.